I'm 91 years old. I've lived through wars, love, heartbreak, and the quiet passing of time. I've watched friends disappear one by one, like candles being blown out in a darkened room. I've watched children grow distant, swallowed up by their own lives and their own demands. I've watched the world change in ways I never imagined, the horse-drawn carts of my childhood replaced by machines that now fit in the palm of your hand, carrying the sum of all human knowledge and yet somehow making people feel more lost than ever. I've seen so much. I've survived so much. And still, when I close my eyes at night and let my mind wander back through the long corridor of my life, there is one thing, one quiet, persistent ache that never quite went away. One mistake that followed me for decades like a shadow I couldn't outrun. If there's one thing I wish I could go back and change, it's this. I spent most of my life trying to make everyone else happy. And in the end, I forgot how to live for myself. I was born in a small house on the edge of a town that most maps forgot to include. The walls were thin, the winters were long, and money was always tight. But dreams, somehow, were plentiful. My mother kept a small garden out back, and I used to sit beside her in the late afternoons while she pulled weeds and hummed to herself. And I would look up at the sky and feel certain, with the absolute conviction that only children possess, that something wonderful was waiting for me out there. I wanted to be a teacher, not just any teacher. I wanted to be the kind of teacher who changed the direction of a child's life, the kind whose name gets remembered. I used to practice in front of the cracked mirror in my bedroom, speaking to an imaginary class, explaining things slowly and clearly, watching their imaginary faces light up with understanding. I could feel it, that future version of myself, confident and purposeful, doing something that mattered.
My parents worked hard. My father rose before the sun every morning and came home after it had set. My mother cleaned other people's houses and never once complained about it, at least not where we could hear. They gave us everything they could, which wasn't much in the way of money, but was considerable in the way of values. If you take care of others, my mother used to tell me, smoothing the hair back from my face, life will take care of you. I believed her completely. I had no reason not to. She was the wisest person I knew, and those words wrapped themselves around my heart like a promise. Kindness would be rewarded, sacrifice would be honored, loyalty would come back around. This was the foundation upon which I built myself. Not out of naivety, but out of genuine faith in the goodness of the arrangement. I was a bright student. My teachers noticed. One of them, a stern woman named Mrs. Albright, who softened considerably whenever she thought no one was watching, pulled me aside once after class and told me I had the kind of mind that could take me anywhere. I walked home that afternoon feeling 10 feet tall, the autumn leaves crunching beneath my feet, my heart so full of possibility I thought it might burst clean out of my chest. I was going to do something. I was sure of it. The world was wide and I was ready. In my 20s, I met the man who would become my husband. He was charming in the way that certain men are, easily, effortlessly, without seeming to try. He had a wide smile and confident opinions and plans for the future that he laid out over dinner like blueprints for a building he was certain would be magnificent. I admired his certainty. I had plenty of dreams of my own, but his came wrapped in a kind of boldness I found irresistible. We married on a warm Saturday in June. I wore my mother's altered dress. The photographs show a young woman who looks radiant and a little overwhelmed, her eyes bright, her smile genuine. I look at those photographs now, and I want to reach through the paper and hold her hand and tell her a few things. But that is not how time works. The children came. First one, then another, then a third. Each one a miracle, each one a joy, and each one a new set of needs that arranged themselves quite naturally above my own. This is not a complaint. I want to be clear about that. I loved my children with a ferocity that surprised me. I would have stepped in front of anything for them. I still would. But there is a difference between choosing to give and slowly forgetting that you ever had anything to give from. Somewhere in those early years of raising children and running a household and supporting my husband's ambitions, the dream of being a teacher quietly moved to the back of the room and sat down. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I would return to it. There was always a reasonable explanation for why now wasn't the right time. The children were too young. The money was too tight. My husband needed me. The moment wasn't quite right. And all of those explanations were true, in their way. But they were also, in their way, a slow surrender that I dressed up as responsibility. I got a job to help with the household income. Not teaching, but close enough that I could tell myself a story about it. I worked hard. I was good at it. People relied on me, and I let them because being relied upon was something I understood, something that gave shape to my days. My own aspirations became something I visited occasionally, the way you might visit a relative who lives too far away, with genuine affection, but less and less frequently until the visits stopped altogether and you simply kept meaning to go. The years passed faster than I had any right to expect. That is something they don't warn you about. When you're young, time feels like a substance you're wading through, thick, slow, sometimes frustrating in its refusal to move. And then, somewhere in your middle years, without any formal announcement, it changes consistency entirely. It becomes water. It becomes air. You reach out to hold a moment, and it has already become the past. I was always busy, always needed. My husband's health required attention as the years went on. My children, even as adults, brought their troubles home with them the way they used to bring dirty laundry, expecting it to be sorted, cleaned, and handed back folded. I did not resent this. Not consciously. I had built an identity around being the person who held things together, and for a long time, that identity felt like enough. Whenever the old dream surfaced, and it did surface, the way things do when you've buried them, but not quite deep enough, I had a reliable way of handling it. I acknowledged it briefly, like nodding at a neighbor across the street, and then I told myself, maybe later. Maybe when things settle down. Maybe when I have more time. Later is a thief. I understand that now. It steals from you so gently that you never feel the taking. You wake up one day and the savings account of your own unlived life is simply empty, and there is no dramatic moment of loss to point to. Just the gradual, quiet accumulation of all the times you chose everyone else first. I was not unhappy. I want to say that plainly. There was real joy in my life, in the laughter of my children, in the particular satisfaction of a household running smoothly, in the small dignities of hard work. I am not telling a story of misery. I am telling a story of something more subtle and, in some ways, more difficult to name. I had a whole self that I had agreed without ever quite consciously agreeing. to leave largely unexplored. One evening, after the last of the children had packed their things and moved into their own lives, I sat alone in the living room. It was not a dramatic evening. There was no storm, no particular grief, no crisis. The house was simply quiet in a way it had never been before. A deep, structural quiet, as if the building itself had exhaled and was now waiting to see what would happen next. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. I had never noticed how loud it was. I sat with my hands in my lap and looked around at the room I had tended for decades. The furniture I had chosen, reupholstered, rearranged, the curtains I had hemmed myself, the photographs arranged on a shelf, holidays, graduations, weddings, the whole illustrated history of a family I had poured myself into. All of it evidence of a life fully given. And I asked myself, for what I believe was the very first time, a question so simple it embarrassed me a little. What did I truly want from life? Not what I had managed to achieve. Not what I had provided for others. Not what people expected of me or needed from me or depended on me for. What did I want? The question sat in the room with me for a long time. I expected an answer to come quickly, like surely a woman of my age knew her own desires. But the silence stretched on, and I realized with a cold, clear shock that I wasn't sure. That I had spent so many years filtering my own wants through the needs of others that I had lost access to the original signal. I knew what made my children happy. I knew what kept my husband content. I knew what the household required. But the thing at the center of all that knowing, my own untended interior life, had gone quiet in a way I hadn't noticed because I had never truly listened for it. I sat with that emptiness for a long time. The clock kept ticking. That is when the regret found me. Not like a dramatic wave, more like a tide coming in at night, slow and inevitable, surrounding you before you realized you had stopped watching the water. My biggest regret wasn't a single mistake. It wasn't a decision I could point to and say, there, that is where I went wrong. It was more diffuse and more devastating than that. It was the life I never allowed myself to live. The year I wanted to take a class and talk myself out of it. The trip I almost booked and then decided was selfish. The opinion I swallowed at the dinner table because it wasn't worth the conflict. The dream I kept on hold until the hold became permanent. The parts of myself, curious, ambitious, wanting, that I had learned to quiet so efficiently that eventually they stopped asking. I said yes when I wanted to say no. So many times that yes became my only language. I stayed silent when I should have spoken, telling myself that keeping the peace was the same as cultivating peace. It is not. One is just the absence of conflict. The other requires honesty. I waited for the right time. Waited for the children to be older. Waited for finances to improve. Waited for my husband to be settled. Waited for everything to align in exactly the right configuration. And the right time simply never came. Because the right time for living your own life is not a destination you arrive at. It is a decision you make. And I kept not making it. And now, at 91 years old, I understand something about that waiting that I could not have understood any sooner. Every year I waited, the life I was waiting to leave grew a little more distant, a little less retrievable, until finally, the distance was permanent. At 91, you develop a particular relationship with time. You understand it in a way that is simply not available to younger people, no matter how clearly they are told. You understand it in your body, in the quality of your mornings, in the way each season feels simultaneously familiar and somehow surprising, as if you cannot quite believe the calendar is doing what it's doing again. Life is not as long as we think. When you're young, the days feel enormous. Each one arrives full, carrying all its hours like a heavy bag, and you carry it without effort because you have never known anything different. You spend those days freely, on arguments that didn't matter, on worrying about what people thought of you, on waiting for a life you imagined was just around the corner. You spend them freely because you believe, without examining the belief, that there are infinite days remaining. There are not. And this is the thing that nobody tells you clearly enough, or perhaps the thing that nobody can be told clearly enough, because it requires the weight of lived experience to feel true. The people you sacrificed for will not carry your sacrifice in the front of their minds. Your children, who you loved beyond reason, who you gave your best years to, they are busy with their own lives, their own loves, their own regrets forming. This is not cruelty. This is simply how life moves forward. But it means that the sacrifice you made in their name, the dreams you set aside on their behalf, will not be fully witnessed or fully honored, not because they do not love you, but because they cannot love you the way you love yourself. Only you can do that. And I waited too long to learn it. Peace, real peace, the kind that lives in your bones, does not come from being needed. It comes from knowing yourself, from having lived with some measure of fidelity to whatever it is that makes you distinctly you, from being able to look back at your life and find, in among all the duties and the love and the loss, evidence that you were also here, present as a full person, not just a function. I have thought about this carefully. At my age, you have a great deal of time for thinking, and you learn to take it seriously. These are the things I know to be true. Not theory, not philosophy borrowed from someone else's wisdom, but the hard-won conclusions of a very long life. Stop trying to please everyone. It is not possible, and the attempt will hollow you out. People's approval is not a stable thing to build a life on. It shifts with their moods, their needs, their own fears and insecurities. If you arrange your entire existence around earning it, you will exhaust yourself and still come up short, because you were never actually in control of the thing you are chasing. Be kind. Be generous, but do it because it reflects your own values, not because you're hoping to earn something in return. Speak your truth early and speak it often. Every time you swallow what you actually think and feel, you practice a kind of self-erasure. It seems harmless. It seems like the civil, accommodating thing to do. But it accumulates. Swallow enough of yourself, and eventually you forget the taste of what you really are. The people worth keeping in your life will not leave because you are honest. And the ones who would leave, well, they were never really there for you to begin with. Protect your time as though your life depends on it, because it does. Other people's urgencies will always expand to fill whatever space you allow them. Your time, the irretrievable hours of your one life, will be cheerfully consumed by anyone you offer it to. You must be the one who guards it. Not with selfishness, but with the full understanding that time given away cannot be reclaimed. Before you say yes, ask yourself whether this is truly where your life should go. Sometimes the answer is yes, but it should always be a conscious choice. Do the things that make your soul feel alive, not the things that look good. Not the things that are practical or sensible or easy to explain to other people. The things that make you feel like the realest version of yourself. That feeling is not decoration. It is not a luxury to be indulged after all the important things are handled. It is an important thing. Perhaps the most important. Because it is the difference between a life that was endured and a life that was actually lived. Do not wait for permission. This is perhaps the one that cost me most dearly. I was always waiting for the moment to be right, for circumstances to improve, for someone to tell me that now was acceptable, that my own wants were justified. No one ever gave me that permission in the way I was waiting for it. Yeah, and the reason is that it was never theirs to give. Your life belongs to you. You do not need to earn the right to inhabit it fully. You only need to decide to. Let go of the version of yourself that others expect. We become, over time, the person that the people around us have decided we are. The reliable one, the selfless one, the one who doesn't complain. These roles are not always wrong, but they are always incomplete. You are more than any role you've been assigned. You are allowed to surprise people. You are allowed to grow in directions that don't fit the story anyone has been telling about you. Remember that it is not too late until it is. I say this carefully because I am 91 years old, and there are things that genuinely are no longer available to me. But I have seen people make profound turns in their 70s. In their 80s, the human capacity for becoming is more durable than we imagine. The beginning may be later than you wanted. The version you achieve may be smaller than you dreamed, but small and real will always be better than large and hypothetical. If you are listening to my story today, if these words have found you at some point in your life when you are still young enough, still open enough, still possessed of enough future to do something with what I am saying, then please hear me. I am not telling you to be selfish. I am not telling you to abandon the people you love or the obligations you've taken on or the values your parents worked hard to give you. Those things matter. Love matters. Loyalty matters. Showing up for the people who need you, that matters enormously. But you are also a person who deserves to show up for yourself. You are allowed to want things. You are allowed to need things. You are allowed to take up space in your own life, not just as a provider or a caretaker or a steady presence for everyone else, but as a living human being with your own hungers and your own curiosity and your own unlived possibilities pressing against the inside of your days. Don't make the mistake I made. Don't spend so many years saying maybe later. That later stops being a time in the future and becomes a country you can no longer reach. Don't quiet yourself so efficiently in the name of keeping everything smooth that you forget what your own voice sounds like when it's speaking freely. Don't wait until you are 91 years old, sitting alone in a quiet house with a ticking clock, and asking yourself for the first time what you truly wanted, and finding that the answer has grown so faint from years of neglect that you have to strain to hear it. Your life belongs to you. It has always belonged to you. Time moves quietly. It does not announce itself. It does not give warnings. It simply passes, gently and relentlessly, and one day you look up and the view is entirely different from what you remember, and you realize with a start that you have arrived somewhere you didn't quite intend, and the road behind you is longer than the road ahead. I wake up on some mornings and I feel the weight of all those unlived days, not with bitterness. I have made my peace with most of it, as you must eventually make your peace with things. But with a tenderness for the young woman I was, who believed so faithfully that taking care of everyone else was the same as living a good life. She was not wrong to love so freely. She was not wrong to give so much. She was only wrong to believe that she didn't also deserve to receive. Live your life, all of it. Not the careful, contained version, the full one, the risky one, the one where you say the true thing and want the real thing and refuse to keep postponing your own existence. I am 91 years old. I have loved and lost and endured more than I can fit into any story. And I would give a great deal to go back to some ordinary Tuesday 40 years ago and simply choose myself. Just once. Just for a day. Just enough to know what it felt like. Don't let that be your regret. You still have time. Use it.